podcast, Tiff. This is a treat to have you here, my friend. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Good. So for those that are listening that have been living under a rock, you were recently featured on a reality show. Mm-hmm. Tell us what the show is called.
Yeah, the show's called The Ultimatum, Queer Love. It's on Netflix, and it's one of the first, if not the first, I think there was one other show back in the day on TV, but on a large streaming platform like this, one of the first all queer dating shows, which opens up the door to a plethora of just different views, experiences, opinions, and kind of busts wide open to the world. So
yeah, exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Despite the drama, very exciting to be a part of it.
Okay, so let's talk about it. How did you get on the show? Why did you want to do the show?
Oh, yeah. So I never thought about being on reality TV ever in my life. I actually had a casting producer reach out to us.
So you're just like walking Shiloh and they're like, yo, we want to put you on the show.
So it's not that easy. It's not that easy.
I'm waiting for that to happen for me. So how did that happen?
A casting producer reached out. She was like, hey, we're looking for XYZ things. Like someone kind of wants to get married, more on the side of wanting to get married, someone not so much. Be together for somewhere between like 2 and 4 years they were looking for, okay. And, like assigned female at birth, like partners. And I think there was another couple criteria.
Sure.
As people who have watched the show already know, my ex and I were back in a lot of cyclical back and forth patterns in our relationship.
You said you broke up 50 times out of 52 weeks or
something like that. It
wow.
was, yeah, well, I guess we'll get into that a little later. That's a lot to unpack.
No, I heard that. I'm like, okay,
yes.
That feels traumatic.
Yes, a little bit. And it's interesting because when you're in the vortex, you really don't see
that's just
that.
your every day. That's
not, it becomes
you're not
normal.
Comparing and contrasting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's your normal. So, she reached out to us. I actually turned the whole thing down at first because I was like, hey, we're actually not in a good spot right now. We're actually on a break. And, we used to talk about marriage a lot, but we're just not in this position right now to like even be thinking about that. Maybe if we were healthier and can communicate better.
So you recognize this probably wouldn't be a good thing for your relationship in its current status.
Yeah. And because they give us a little template. And keep in mind, season 1, The Ultimatum, was not aired yet. We're in the middle of filming season 1 when they reached out to us. So the Ultimatum franchise wasn't even public.
So you didn't know what to expect, whereas we assume that you've watched
season 1
and you're like,
and this
okay, I know how this goes.
Absolutely not. We were like the second guinea pig season of everything. Wow. So we had nothing to look at. So I immediately just kind of like turned it down, and then I thought it was cool. I never talked to a producer in my life before, so, I randomly just kept in touch with her a little bit. And I was like, what's your favorite part of the job? And XYZ. Fast forward a day later, she's like, so wait, why don't you think that you're like good for this position? And I was just like, because we're not in a good spot, like the same thing. And she was like, I think that's what we're looking for. AKA, now I look back on it, toxicity. I was like, oh, okay, this comes full circle after the whole entire project is done, I guess
I've heard producers are not your friends.
Producers can, so they can be your friends, but first of all, they're there for a job.
Sure.
So
I wouldn't get the product, and you're the product.
Exactly. Okay. So when it comes to that, there are producers I am still friends with to this day, but I also understood the assignment that they have to also do jobs. So I guess you can dibble-dabble in both. Yeah.
Okay. So they got you on. You were a little hesitant, but you guys were like, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
So at the time that you guys started filming, you were on again-ish?
Yeah. So, I mean,
because there's things I heard and I wanted to like just clarify in case I misheard them. Like I thought I heard you guys were having the scene on the beach with the dogs. It was adorable.
Yeah.
Had we not said we loved each other before the show? Because it sort of like is edited like we hadn't told each other we loved each other. We've been together for 2 years.
No.
So
yeah, we definitely said we loved each other.
Okay.
But it's interesting looking back on it. I did hold off a lot. And maybe I just wasn't listening to my gut because I realized in the beginning that something was off. And I didn't quite understand that looking back, just in the relationship, And I'm not here to like shame who's wrong, who's right,
No,
but I'm just kind of like
your
observing.
perspective.
Yeah. Something was always kind of a little bit off, and I didn't understand why I was, despite my feelings, romantic feelings I had for her, I didn't quite understand why I was so hesitant to do things at the same exact time. But I thought that, you know, man, maybe, like, I didn't like the up and down roller coaster.
Yeah.
I just wanted to even it out.
Did you guys start to feel like when that's not there that something's wrong? Like, I have clients that, like, the highs feel very, very high. And so when we start to kind of, like, plateau out, we sometimes subconsciously create the highs again because that's where we're used to existing, and it feels, like, passionate, and we have chemistry, and it's magical.
Yeah. It's this, I think it's this possibly comes from, you know, like trauma as a child, right? Like where we have unsettled households and very, you know, like dynamics of slamming the door and chaos is like normal. So when you don't have that, it's like kind of, oh man, like something must be wrong because it's normal. Yeah, uncomfortable. You know, I've had my share of past relationships where that was, I think in my younger 20s, where that was pretty normal. I did create a level of self-awareness, though, that, you know, as my relationships progressed, where I realized, like, I realized that behavior and I realized that pattern. So I would say my prior relationships did not reflect anything at all to what this relationship was walking into it. And this
felt maybe more similar to what you grew up with, so...
Yeah, I would say, definitely. Yeah. But I think a lot of it, too, was, I think there's this whole level of, man, I got to try harder. I got to try harder, which goes back to my childhood.
And I saw that on your face. Of course, they're editing things, so whatever I saw. But you guys were sitting around the jacuzzi or the pool at that fabulous place you were living at.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, Mildred was reflecting on you just keep showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up. Mm-hmm. And I was waiting to see, like, a little light bulb come on your face about, like, why do I keep showing up? Like, you're not giving me enough to, like, make this a worthy investment of my energy or my time, but yet to hear you say, well, I just work harder in relationships.
Yeah. And there's a few thoughts there, right? So for context, it actually you see a snapshot, 1% into everything that goes on in the show. But it was actually my relationship that I had with Sam as a trial partner, although it was not romantic. You know, I guess when the cameras went down, we had a lot of other talks, you know, and it was actually us working together because I think she's very trauma-informed, very emotionally intelligent. And we actually found the common denominator as why I felt the need to keep trying with my ex. And that was the relationship that I had with my father growing up, you know? And just to put that in a nutshell, he worked a lot. He's an amazing man. He worked a lot. He owned his own restaurant business. And he grew up in a not-so-stable home and everything like that. And I think he just showed love the best way he knew how.
He provided.
And yes, he provided, exactly, because he was focused on survival, right? But he would always, despite how many hours or how stressed out he was, he would always show up. The way he showed his love was to show up to my basketball games. And we know as athletes, and even professional athletes, I mean, you can bust your ass. It's so much, right? But only put 10 points on the board. And that, even though you try your hardest, sometimes it's not enough in the sports world. So I felt like sometimes that he showed tough love sometimes. So I felt like if I had a bad game, like all you want to do is make your parents proud, right? Yeah. So when you feel like that's my only time to shine in front of my dad because I didn't get a lot of time. So when you're constantly trying, and then sometimes maybe you just didn't succeed, that affects you as a kid, you know?
Well, it sounds like you're putting aside your own disappointment, your own frustration, your own sense of, like, how did I do? How am I handling this? Like, I got to shove that aside. I got to make sure that dad's attended to.
Yeah.
And that dad feels proud and that dad's okay and that dad isn't experiencing any discomfort about watching me play.
Yeah.
So that was like a coping skill that you transferred to your relationship.
Absolutely. And I didn't realize that until actually the trial marriage that I had with Sam and us, like, getting close with each other. I actually called up my dad during the show. They filmed it, but it never made it the cut, right? But, you know, just to, like, kind of just out of nowhere, just be like, I see how you tried your best to show for love the best way you knew how. And he's like, I am so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so we just had, like, a really, like head-to-head moment in that space, you know? So that's my first thought. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It was really warming. I loved it. And then the second thought of me just constantly going back and forth, trying with Mildred. I thought it was ironic looking back on the show, right? When you're an ultimatum giver or an ultimatum receiver. For someone that wants to get married and wants to be married to you is the one that keeps on tossing you away or discarding you. Sure. I didn't understand. Like I just thought, again, it was so normal. Like, if anything, I felt like it should have been the other way around. I don't know. Like,
you should be making the demands. If she wants to get married so much to you,
it's
then
like
you should be able to set your list of criteria in order for that to happen.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how, like, someone that wants someone so much says, I want to be with you, but then just the second something doesn't align right, throw away, and then as what I believe might have been her coping mechanism of, her upbringing and just the story she's told me and, not fully my story to tell, but just overall what you guys see on the show, it's like the fear of abandonment, like a lot of people have left her in her life. So I can only imagine maybe if I were in their shoes.
It almost felt like I'm going to reject you before you reject me. And you addressed that on, again, with the lovely decorating in those places. You were sitting on this cool white couch, I remember. Yeah. And you said it really articulately, like, are you in love with me or in love with the idea of being in a relationship? Yeah.
Right? And I think, it's this almost like a natural mechanism to have a control dynamic of I'm going to be the one that leaves before I leave. And also just seeing when you even see on the show where she walks off stage a lot. Here I am chasing her. And it's just no matter how hard I tried, I don't know. So I constantly was thinking, I'm pretty open to figuring out and being vulnerable of like where I'm being wrong in the relationship. I definitely didn't think I was perfect in the relationship, not at all. But I just kept on thinking like, why am I always the problem? Why am I always the problem? Why am I? This is the way I felt like in the relationship. And I look back on it now and like my level of self-esteem during the relationship, just didn't match up to who I really was. And
it doesn't sound like it felt like an option to see getting out as an option either. Yeah. So I just have to work harder. Of course it's me. Now I have control though, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of what we fall into is if it is me, then I can have control and I can change things so that I can feel like I'm safe.
Exactly. And that's what was the most confusing part. It's like the cognitive dissonance of like being like, man, no matter what I do, if I run away, there's consequences. If I, like what is it called, fawn? Like when you kind of give into something, that's like a disservice to my soul. And like if I, it started to become so emotionally, spiritually, and physically exhausting. And I just had to come to peace with, hey, you know what? Let's just say worst case scenario, it is me. Let's just say it is. That means that I'm not meant for this person. Even if it is me, I think that was the biggest, toughest part to wrap around my brain. Like, is it me or is it not me? Is it me or is it not me? It doesn't feel like it's me, but here I am trying to also be open and trying to explore what I can do better. That was that whole show experience of when I'm with Sam, my trial marriage wife, like, we have time apart in this experience. That's another reason why, the big reason why we even went on the show to begin with, to have time apart, to reflect. And
to see if you missed each other.
Yeah, well, missed each other. I mean, that's going to be an obvious. You obviously saw, but also just to reflect back on like, and unfortunately, the entire experience, I was like reflecting back on like, how can I show it better? How can I show it better still? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers to it, but I had to come to peace with the confusion of wondering is it me, is it not me, is it me, is it not me? But I came to peace with saying, hey, you know what? Let's just say it is me. Then we're not meant for each other.
And that lets you give yourself a pass so that you don't keep beating yourself up with your story.
And ruminating and going back and forth and confusing myself even more. Yeah. So like that's kind of where I come to terms with things, and then just educated myself on some stuff, and then realized this is something I need to get out of. So hence, coming to therapy here allowed me a safe space to express that, and started, as we know in relationships sometimes, in certain types of relationships, it's almost like this trauma bond that kind of keeps you there, right?
Sure.
And
it doesn't. Nobody else knows the depth of what you've gone through except that other person, but they're also the one that you hold secrets with, and that keeps you sick.
Exactly. And through that, from what I hear, it doesn't just end, one time. It takes multiple attempts to like kind of finally find your way out. So it was about a 2-month process or so, I would say. And I just, one day it happened, and my gut was screaming. That's the one thing I will say to anyone that is in this kind of like tumultuous relationships. Do not ignore your gut. I think it speaks volumes. Absolutely.
You seemed floored on the very short tell-all. I was like, wait, where's all the other parts? All of these shows always have like 3 parts. You just seemed like, where the hell is all this coming from? What is happening right now? Mm-hmm. It didn't seem like you anticipated what she was going to do or what she was going to say or how she said it.
Are you referring to at the reunion?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So my therapist and I were actually kind of like predicting that something might be happening like that. Like based on, what I tell her. Like we've been. How long were you
guys broken up between the time that they did the reunion?
Yeah, so I broke up with her in September of 2022.
Okay.
And the reunion was January of 2023. So it was about.
You guys weren't talking or communicating.
Zero contact about 4 or 5 months.
That must have been scary, thinking, what am I walking into?
What am I walking into? Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot that's up in the air. We kind of guessed that certain things might happen based on my previous experience in the relationship. But you never know until it actually is right in your face. And what I will say, though, is there's this extra layer that's added on to a reality television show, especially a big one where billions of people watch. I think if I was behind closed doors, with Mildred, and that would have happened, I think I would have been like, I use my tools and like, just the coping mechanisms and, having a level of indifference after 4 months. I think I would have been like, okay, that's fine. Now you put it in another layer wrapped around where you're currently in a room with 50 to 80 people. Cameras and stuff, and 50 to 80 people in production, and your entire castmates, that you got to know, and you're being, kind of, what in my opinion, smeared. That adds another layer to it, where, it's like, okay, this is a level of embarrassment. I'm being humiliated right now. But then you wrap it around another layer. So everything was going on in real time. I'm sitting there, and a whole bunch of different stimuli and different things are processing in my brain, like what's actually happening right now. But when you add a layer of like, wow, it's only a matter of months. Currently, right now in this right time, it's only a matter of months until millions of people see what's happening to me right now. It just adds an entire other layer, and
everything I do is going to be picked apart, and I'm in a mental space right now where I'm physiologically overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
And so I can't even put like a sentence together right now, let alone do I defend myself? Do I take higher ground? Mm-hmm. Like, how do I object to what she's saying but let her have her own space?
Exactly.
That must have been a mind screw.
Yeah. And I already knew, like, trying to defend myself, but have to raise my voice or defend myself and have to... don't get me wrong. It was so tempting to be able to feel like I'm heard too. And, like, you're coming at me like this? Yeah. Hey, what about you? Everything wanted to do that. But there was, again, that intuition that I've developed post-relationship that said, no, do not do it. Do not do it.
That also speaks to your character, Tiff. It's like you are not a person that is like tit for tat, right? Yeah. She said something hurtful. Your ammo is not like, well, let me just tear you down 5 times faster, because that's really not who you are.
Yeah. And I was watching some other podcasts about like psychologists or therapists like breaking down the reunion, and what they said was interesting. She used her ammo was to use speculation facts that no one knows in that room whether it's true or not.
True.
To use as a weapon to vilify me, or to make me look incredibly bad, to shift blame an experience that she wasn't willing to accept accountability for her own wrongdoing, which we obviously know was like the DV. So when I kind of heard that, I was like, man, like that makes sense. Like just the whole speculative things with no receipts, with no this, with no that no one in that room will never know if it's true or not, to use that and berate me, not give me a chance to speak, then shift it and say, hey, you don't have power over me anymore. I'm like, what? Like, when did I...
What power did I have?
Whatever power did I have? And again, relationships, as we know, are very deep and very complex, and only behind closed doors people know what it's like. So with that sprinkled into this whole reality of it, and millions of people are watching, we all have a right to feel frustrated, and we all have a right to feel the need to be heard, and we all have this right to be angry about certain things. I had my own share of anger, but using that platform and that moment in time with the platform of Netflix, right, to use that as an opportunity to absolutely tear someone down off of just pure speculation, that to me, I didn't want to match that character. I didn't want to match that energy, as tempting as it was. And I knew... You
wanted to end it with grace. You wanted to give the relationship respect.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how much, I knew that I was going to be judged for it. I mean, obviously, we're on reality TV, right? I knew that I was going to be judged for it. But my character, my gut, just said, no, don't do it. And so I got to a place in time, in a moment where I realized no matter what I say or do right now, you see me start to raise my voice at the end, because it's like, to me, it just,
you're defending your character because no one else in the room is stepping up. No one was like, how do you know that's true? Why are you saying that? That's like, nobody was coming to your defense.
And then glossing over the DV part of it. So when I got to a point, again, I think that that's another thing I will say after this. But it got to a point where the only way that I could leave is to actually like dismantle the situation, go no contact. I was going no contact to begin with, and I realized that's the best way to do it. But when you're kind of forced in a position to actually have to see your ex again and talk about these things, it just, fire is going to play with more fire, and it's going to get bigger. That's the only way to choose myself, was to literally choose myself and walk out at that point.
Good choice.
But with the whole DV thing, it's interesting how reality TV does it, right?
Well, I'm sitting there going, like, is there a restraining order? Like, are you supposed to be in the same room? Like, I mean, those are, like, therapy things that I think about.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's kind of, like, wrapped around a couple layers. So Netflix did know about the whole entire, like, police report and everything. They did know. I let them know ahead of time. I was just being transparent with them.
That's a safety issue as well. I mean, that's liability stuff. You need to be open and honest, and maybe to protect you. You don't know what you're walking into.
Exactly. So, they did know about it. When I look back on it, a lot of people say, hey, you know what? Like, this is kind of like double standards, because if Mildred was a masculine man and then I was a feminine woman, would this have even happened? And that's something I never thought about, And it's interesting because even post-reunion, after all that happened, 2 weeks before the show aired, we were all invited to like a Netflix Pride event with other reality TV people, and we were both invited. And they did their due diligence of saying, hey, she's arriving, she's going to be over here, you know, but there was hundreds of people at that event, you know, but it makes me wonder too. It's kind of like, man, if Mildred were a masculine man and I was, you know, a straight woman, yeah, would they even be allowed in that room? Like it's very interesting, especially when the person admitted to it. You know, so
well, I don't remember her admitting to. I hear her talk about the like behaviors, but I didn't hear her taking responsibility. Did I miss something?
Mean, she didn't take responsibility. She admitted what you see on the reunion is that she did. We did get in a fight, and she did slam picture frames, and then she did throw a heavy dog gate at me.
Okay.
You know, so she did admit that. And
did you see remorse that we didn't see as viewers?
No, not at all. So what you see on the reunion is actually how it played out in that 30-second time frame. She immediately shifted that. And she did say something like, I'm not very proud of it, but that's kind of the extent. But she shifted that, and she was like, and you called the police on me.
As well you should.
Yeah, she goes,
I'm sure you felt unsafe.
Yeah. And you called the police on me, and they took off my ring, and I never put it back on. And it was like the way that it was like said, and on top of that, like it matches the viewers because so many of the viewers were like, the way it was perceived was like you admitted DV, glossed over it, and then made it look like it was Tiff's fault again, you know, for doing that. So it's really.
So you got traumatized in that moment because now you had insult added to injury, right? That somebody is saying to you, hey, your responsibility is you. Like she made it seem as if, which is not unusual in, you know, interpersonal violence, is that I'm not going to take any responsibility. If you would just behave differently, I wouldn't have done this. And that's not fair to you.
Yeah. And the way I see it too is she attacked my character on the reunion, that I wasn't this or that I wasn't like this or this or this. But it's interesting because, you know, I was trying to prove myself over and over and over again to her and kept on coming back and coming back. You know, so like there's this, I'm going to call it, I'm not going to flat out say manipulation, but just trying to like understand and work on myself. But I felt like during the reunion, she justified her behavior of doing the DV thing in regards to my character and just who I was and my lifestyle choices. You know, like that's the way it came off. And I'm just like, you're justifying that on behalf of this. And, like, you know, the typical things of like, you know, I'm not here to sit and say what's true, what's not true or any of that, but just the different accusations. It wasn't accusations of treating her horribly. It was accusations of over rent. It was accusations of over a job. It was like those kind of things, you know? And I'm like, how does that justify, you know? So I just felt like if she wasn't happy in that regard.
That there would be a conversation versus a behavior?
Yeah, conversation versus behavior, or leave me if you don't, if that is what it was overall, like you're not happy about.
I really like how you modeled leaving the situation and going and collecting yourself and making sure that you looked out for yourself and not feeling the pressure of, oh, there's a TV show, I got to go back in there and you like, no, I'm not okay. I need to ground myself. I need to like gather myself. This is overwhelming, and I'm not doing anybody any favors by staying in this situation and giving them, you know, the video content that they want at my own personal expense.
Exactly. You know, as much as, you know, Netflix is doing a job, right? What I will say, and this is not me having to say this is just completely free will. You know, it's a big corporation, you know, but these are people individually in individual positions at the end of the day, people who have feelings and people who, you know, and there were a lot of people in that room that day that did come to me. And it did, you know, you had the executive producer of the entire project, the decision maker, to say, hey, you know what, this is the clips that we're going to see and these are the clips that we're not going to see. Sit me down and go, hey, like, trust me, like, just trust this process. Like, you know, and so And also there actually was a therapist on site there. And I did see them because like during the reunions of Kinetic Content, they do have a therapist on site, like in very heated moments, which tends to happen at reunions. Yeah. So I did like talk to her behind closed doors for like 20, 30 minutes or so. And they did, don't get me wrong, they did have people come in and politely ask me, hey, would you like to go back on stage? I think this is a perfect opportunity for you to have your voice, to be heard. Gotcha. And it's interesting because at the time, yes, I was very emotional, which by the way, the whole berating scene, you guys see 4 or 5 minutes of it, it was 15 to 20 minutes straight. You know, you only see a small amount. And then the whole scene out there with Sam when I was crying outside and everything, that lasted like 30 minutes. So this was going on like 45 minutes, you know? You guys see a snapshot. But yeah, they wanted me to, you know, go back on. They didn't force me, obviously, but they wanted to say, hey, this is a perfect opportunity for you to get your voice. And my thought during the time was 2 things. One was, I mean, like, with all due respect, like, this is me going back up on stage with my experience with my abuser at this point. And I allowed it one time. I felt like I was emotionally abused on stage. And then, so for me to come back up again, I just saw that as like, I can't keep on doing this, like, you know? And my second thought was, you know what my voice is? My voice, my stance is telling the world that she's not my battle to fight anymore. And that is my voice. Me leaving is my voice, because my voice of trying to run back to her and trying to fight every time I got discarded, regardless of who's right or who's wrong, right? The act of that alone was my voice, but it was powerless during the relationship. So getting out of the relationship, saying, hey, this isn't my battle to fight anymore, and I'm choosing myself, that is how I expressed my power on that show. And as I can definitely see now that it's out to the world and all the thousands of DMs I've been getting just on this topic alone, so many people are like, I see you and I see myself in you, of when I was in a situation like that. And that I knew, like, in my gut paid off, because I realized before the show even aired, and before you see people's reactions or not see people's reactions, I was like, wow, this whole thing that's going on, this is a lot bigger than me. Because when you hear of these kind of issues in intimate, intimate partner, like, relationships, you see it maybe in the public eye with celebrities, right? Yeah. But there's no cameras involved. Like, you take the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard case.
Except for.
Yeah, Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, like a couple like things, snippets here and there, right? And then you also see it, the viewers on the couch see it on actual TV shows or movies. Yeah. But these people are actors, and when the cameras go down, they live a completely different life. I think what stuck to people the most is that when I was sitting down, or when they're sitting down, they're watching it, they realize that this is actually a real person, and it's all documented on camera right before their eyes. And that just hits home, I think, a little different to a lot of people. That's where, like, I felt like because of that, there were a lot of people that reached out to me.
Because it's there forever for you to have to keep reliving it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But again, I have 2 choices in that, right? I have the choice to let it kind of eat me alive and know that I was humiliated in front of millions of people, or I could use that in a way to get my power back to say, hey, you know what? Hopefully this creates a sense of self-awareness to a lot of people that watch this, and maybe for them to realize that, hey, you know what? I might be in this situation myself or something similar. And what do I do about it? You know, it just gets the conversation going.
Yeah, which is an important conversation, and I'm grateful that you were there to help do it with grace.
As best as I could. As best as I could. It was tempting.
You've never been here in life before, so how are you supposed to know how to handle it?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you dug in and you're like, what's my core values? What does this represent to me? What's okay with me? What's not okay with me? Not what do other people need from me? What did I commit to do? Like, what at the end of the day is the thing that's going to make me feel like I chose well?
Yeah, and that's a interesting thing, too, because when it came to, like, you know, all my life with my sexual orientation or my gender identity and all of that, I've always been so set on of like, respectfully, like, I don't give a damn what you think, like that is who I am. I'm going to choose myself. Like that was locked in solid. But going through this 8-week experience plus a reunion day, I started to create another level of self-awareness with other things that had to do with things outside of that, where I do have the opportunity to choose myself in a softly manipulating Hollywood kind of ish production where I can choose myself because I'm not an actor reading off a script. Like, yeah, sure, they have the power to edit it however they want to.
Sure.
But I do have a choice in this moment to be who I want to be. And that was interesting. And then, when you look back on how you navigate relationships, there is this level of self-awareness going on because you realize sometimes you forget the cameras are there, but then again, maybe not so much. And it's then looking back on it and watching it and everything too. And time, right? Time heals. It gives you this level of self-awareness as well. So I've always been pretty self-aware, like, of me, like, specifically, but not that particular relationship. I lacked that. I don't know if that was taken away from me or whether I just ignored it. I don't know. It's one of those things where you're like, you look back on it and it's still kind of confusing, but it doesn't all have to make sense, right? It just wasn't meant to be.
Just where you needed to be at that moment, to be where you
My
are
life.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
So going through this, what does commitment mean to you, love? Like, where are you at with what are you willing to do for commitment, and what is it moving forward for you?
Commitment as far as like relationships and stuff like that.
Or commitment to yourself.
Yeah,
right?
commitment to myself. It was a very, very life-changing experience. That was shut a year and 8 months ago, and it reopened again in a different way, manifested in a different way. But as far as commitment goes, I think I look at everything through a different lens now, for sure. You can use that as an opportunity just to be like, hey, I live that. Or you can just take those life experiences and run with them. And I'm committed, especially with all people in my life, platonic too. So committed to listening to my gut. Oh, that's a big thing. Setting boundaries and creating boundaries. I didn't know what boundaries even were, like, really, when I was dating my ex. And any type, like, it's not something I really talked about or discussed or, and the times I felt like I was setting boundaries or stepping my foot down, I guess is what I referred it to. Like, hey, this is where I'm stepping my foot down. It would be spun, in my experience at least, it would be spun in a way to where it's like, no, you're the problem. So then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll let this slide then.
To ask for boundaries is a problem, or to identify that we're enmeshed with each other is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just kind of like, well, I'm the problem, so am I stepping down boundaries? Or you give someone the benefit of the doubt because her and I had completely different upbringings, right? And she grew up in Compton and didn't, there's just, we come from two very different lives.
Yeah.
So I always try to see it from her eyes and her eyes and her eyes, as far as like, I wouldn't go as far deep into like a victim complex, but to me, I have a big heart, and I put that energy towards someone before putting it towards me first. And I realized my like level perhaps in that relationship of codependency. I realized that I was expending all my energy on someone and not myself. And I felt like because of that, it robbed me of like my soul and my heart after some time, and that is post-relationship. That was the hardest thing to grieve and get over. Like going to therapy, I just remember there were so many times I like broke down and like crying and just being like, I'm so angry at myself. Like, how did I stay in that for so long? Regardless of who's right, who's wrong. Why did I stay in that for so long? How did I not see these things? How did I not see this coming? How did I not stand up for myself in this certain situation? How did I let this slide? How did I let these patterns go on and one day wake up and all of a sudden I'm like kind of stuck in this trauma bond? Like, how, like, how did I not recognize what I saw as red flags? Like, how, and it was a lot of frustration towards myself, because I felt like I just wasted 3 years of my life,
Well,
but
you learned what you needed to learn, so you didn't continue.
Yeah. And there's this also, it opened up a door of opportunity to use that frustration and that guilt as being soft and forgiving myself and showing myself self-compassion. And what that looks like, actually, I, would meditate a lot. Like people say, like, oh, healing. What does that look like, right? Specifically, obviously, talking about it in therapy here. But, also, what does that look like behind closed doors? It's being with myself and not running away from those feelings, but actually feeling them. And also knowing that those feelings aren't you. They aren't a part of you. They're literally just like energy balls, right? Like that's the way I visualize it, energy balls that are moving in and out. And I can either choose to attach to them and identify with them, or I can just know that these are just based on my previous experience in my life and all the things that built up to this moment, that I can, disassociate from it and just realize that, hey, I can feel this. This is in my space right now, but this is not me. And when you do that, I would actually sit there for 15, 20 minutes, and do that. And I also did like a EFT, like emotional freedom technique tapping that helped too. When I actually felt it and just was with it and showed it self-compassion, I would actually visualize myself, right? Like hugging my little inner child, like hugging this feeling that I have. And I would almost like look at it like a 3D, like where I kind of look in and just hugging this part of me that we're conditioned in society to be so hard and to, just kind of not, shrug it off and, like that busy lifestyle and everything, and having quiet time and showing myself and feeling compassion. And if I felt horrible, like embrace the horribleness and show it love and show it compassion, be recognizing, saying, hey, I feel horrible right now. I feel shitty. But I am also willing to see that for what it is, accept it, not run away from it. And also the little bit I have, feel self-compassion in this moment in space of feeling shitty. That
healthy, Tiff.
That itself dismantled the power of the emotion itself. Like it started to kind of go down. And I then
took some of the power away.
The
avoidance, the fear, the wanting to run away from it and reject it.
Yeah. And so that's what I would say, like what healing looked like to me, is not being afraid or avoiding those feelings, but also not excusing them for, oh, that's just the way it is. That's just the way I feel. And I'm going to feel like this until whenever. There's this balance where you can show up and choose to show up the best way you can, and also use it as an opportunity to ascend. That's the way I saw it as far as healing goes.
You've been busy since the show.
Yeah.
You're doing some things.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you an opportunity also to talk about what you're working on now, because I know that you're passionate about it. What are you up to?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely like a lot of like, I think, I'm not labeling anyone or anything, but there have been a lot of people that reached out to me just about overall narcissism and overall DV things. And so I'm actually working individually with like DV counselors now and therapists. And together, right, I'm using my platform, and together we're, and then having a professional in that field that can understand it and, kind of piece it all together for safety reasons and everything too. One of the many things I'm doing right now is having like weekly like support group sessions. So, but that's also facilitated by someone that is obviously professionally like bound in that field to handle some maybe tough situations that come up. But I just think I see that as an opportunity to not necessarily shame anyone and talk specifically about someone, and but I use it as a way of I can have a voice and talk about my experience and my healing part of it. you know, the healing part of it, I think, is what I want to focus on. So, yeah, we've been doing a little bit of that. And then, yeah, I mean, I have a podcast and where it's more queer focused. I just talk about the funny things. You know, half of my personality, it's really weird. Oh my gosh, it's so weird how I'm a very deep and complex person, but the other half of me, if not more, okay, is very like funny and just like blah and blunt and just like crazy, you know? And so there is this, yes, very outspoken. So there is this balance to me. And I think you got to see both of that on the show, but because of the whole serious situation that happened at the end, it kind of like tampered it and tapered it in a way of like...
Overshined you getting to be the Tiff that likes to have fun.
Yes.
And is sunshine in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I just, as much as I'm kind of doing that, I'm also, you know, over here doing like my podcast and I'm just being myself right now. And I'm doing a lot of like, you know, just taking advantage of Pride Month and Pride season. I think it's Pride season, to be honest. It's not just June anymore. It's July. It's August. Let's be real. And, you know, I'm being flown out to different places to, like, help promote events and things like that. Just seeing, you know, meeting all these people and what I hear back of, like, man, like, regardless of the drama, like, the queer representation in the media is so imperative, I think, in today, because I think it helps normalize the gap between there's way more that unites us than divides us. And I think it's about time. I think it's about time that happens. And I think that there are plenty of people who identify as straight that maybe are in Kansas right now that are sitting down on that couch, right? And they're like, man,
what does queer mean?
What's queer? What's queer? And they're just sitting down and they're just like, oh, I guess I'm going to give this a shot, you know? Like, and,
I like all their haircuts. What's happening?
Yeah, what's all these haircuts? Oh, 2 women? Oh my gosh, you know? And it just like, but then they realize halfway through, they're like, man, like, this is not much different from me and my ex-girlfriend or me and my boyfriend, like, or whatever it is. Like, you're like, man, there actually is not that much different.
Although the one thing that was different that I want to circle back to is I really liked that there seemed to be, because I watched the first Ultimatum as well, they were just ready to jump in and have sex and do all the things. Yeah. And you guys were representing as like, no, this is like a sacred thing. Like, what do you mean? You like, was there a mat? Like, there was just such a difference in the way that sex was respected.
Yeah.
Do you see that? I mean, or was that just how it was portrayed on the show? But it definitely felt like everything was available. We were on like Donkey Kong in the first Ultimatum, and then in your season, it's like, no, we don't do that. That's not appropriate. That's not sacred. That's like you disrespecting the sanctity of what happens in the bedroom.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I think a little bit has to do with maybe the whole queer dynamic of it, but I also think a lot of it has to do with age as well. Possibly. I mean,
because you're older and wiser.
A little. I mean, well, we would hope so. Maybe not as much as we want to be, because all of us are on the show. But yeah, like just the age part of it. You know, I just look back into when I was like 21, 22, 23. You know, like, I mean, obviously everyone's feelings are valid, but like, you know, it just seemed a little bit more fast paced, or a little bit like, oh, you're not the one. Okay, next. Like it was just like that. You know.
Sure.
And I think, you know, at this point in time, I think also a lot of us cast members on this season were together. I would say the average time we were together was a little bit more. Okay. You know, I think Vanessa and Xander on the show, for instance, I think they were together for like 4 years at that point, you know, and...
so there was more on the line.
I think there was more on the line. And also, again... maybe with a lot of your clients, I don't know, like the level of intimacy and emotional connection with 2 women or assigned female at birth people can come off maybe more intense or more faster progressing in the sense of it. I don't know if that's been your kind of your expertise, your subject matter expert. So I think there's, you know, with the physical, it's going to be the emotional. So
I liked that was represented. That feels good to see. That the stakes felt higher, right? That there's emotion involved. It's not just physicality, that you don't have physicality without emotion, and that everyone seemingly in the cast seemed to really respect that emotional connection that they had with all of their partners, right? I also, you wouldn't want to disrespect Sam by just kind of treating Sam as if Sam was just your placeholder, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I know what you see on it, on the show. Like, she was more open, I think, to exploring things. I didn't want to lead anyone on. So I just...
Why are you not with your best friend or the friend that was on the show? Because you guys have like this amazing chemistry, very direct, matches your personality.
Yeah, but just friendship vibes. I tend to be more attracted to more like feminine women, so that kind of was like my homie,
But right on target, like, hey, here's what's happening, here's what you need. I was like, why are you not the host of the show?
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that. It's funny, we didn't think that, like, just her whole aura was gonna blow up on social media, and it did. We were like, wow, because she was asking the hard questions.
That we were all asking at home.
Yeah, the obvious hard questions.
Why? What is happening? What are you two doing? Why?
What are you two doing? Why? And but yeah, like I respected Sam. We both knew when we were together, like in our little trial marriage, that and by the way, we say a trial marriage, but it is our full-time job for the 3 weeks we are together to have tough conversations and to do these things and to go through these motions. And we're saying like, hey, take the process very seriously, even if there's no romantic connection, right? So like there was no romantic connection on me and Sam's end, me towards her, but like I said, hey, you know what? If I have 3 weeks where I'm not going to be talking to Mildred at all or seeing her or nothing, and you think 2 weeks before that, I didn't see Mildred, talk to Mildred, so there's 5 weeks where I have space, which I never had space with Mildred. So when you think, you're like, man, I have this opportunity to roll through the punches of how I would show up in a trial marriage, maybe just not the physical part, and maybe just not the romantic part, but the partnership part. Here, let me give this a try.
Having to have a difficult conversation so you can move forward in your relationship.
Yeah, and Sam and I did have a connection, right? So like, it was a more of a friendship level, but I took that as like, okay, the companionship part of monogamous marriages, there is a companionship element to it. There's many layers to marriage, but let me give that one a go, and definitely learned a lot through that for sure.
I so appreciated getting to watch how you handled yourself. So I'm really grateful that you came in to chat with us. How can people find you if they want to reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yes, I'm on Instagram. I guess I've been using TikTok ever since my platform came out. I'm not a natural TikToker, but whatever. It's just tiff.der, so tiff.ddr. And that's where you can find me on my platforms, Instagram.
Shiloh.
And Shiloh, yeah. Shiloh's, people are like, Shiloh needs to have her own Instagram. But honestly, if anything, I need to be on Shiloh's Instagram at this point.
We all need to be on Shiloh's Instagram.
Yeah. The funniest thing is when I'm with my dog in public here in San Diego, because the show takes place in San Diego, right? I would say 1 out of every 4 to 5 times I get recognized in public, they recognize my dog before me, because they'll come up and be like, Shiloh? And like they see both of us, but they'll be like, Shiloh?
Can I have a autograph?
Yeah, exactly. It actually happened the first night, like probably a few weeks ago, where someone just walked past me and was like, is that Shiloh? And I was just like, yes, I'm the human. I'm the owner. She got some goodies from PetSmart today. So we're going to unbox a whole bunch of treats and stuff today for her. So I'm excited.
Good. Well, I am thrilled to see what you continue doing, and I'm really appreciative that you took some time to hang out with us.
Oh my gosh. Of course. I love coming here, by the way.
We love having you.
Yes.
All right, love. Thank you so much.
Yep, sure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the D-Spot. Find me, Dr. Dana McNeil, and my guests on social media using the links down below. Subscribe for new episodes weekly and leave a comment letting us know how and if you can relate or what topics you'd like us to cover next. See you next time, and don't forget, go into therapy is cool.